The Cedar Falls courthouse was buzzing with tension, though no one could quite put a finger on why. Sunlight streamed through the tall, narrow windows, painting golden streaks across polished wooden benches and glinting off brass nameplates. The air was thick with the hum of murmurs, journalists adjusting microphones, lawyers flipping through notes, and spectators leaning forward, craning their necks to see what everyone already knew. A 3-year-old girl was about to take the stand. Lily Harper sat in her mother's lap, clutching her stuffed bunny, a frayed, once-white toy with one missing ear. The plush companion had accompanied her to doctor visits, birthday parties, and now the most intimidating place of her young life, a courtroom. Her little legs swung back and forth, toes barely reaching the edge of the chair. She didn't understand what a trial was, or why the people in black robes looked so serious, or why her mom's face was tight with worry. But she did know something important. The grown-ups around her were anxious, and she felt that anxiety like a low hum vibrating through her tiny body. Across the courtroom, near the evidence table, lay Titan, the police K9 at the center of this trial. The dog was a massive Belgian Malinois, muscles rippling beneath a sleek black coat, eyes sharp and alert but for now still. His handler, Officer Blake Turner, stood beside him, gripping the leash with a knuckled grip that made his knuckles pale. He scanned the room constantly, aware that every eye was on his dog, every whisper analyzed, every movement judged. Titan's reputation was impeccable. He had been involved in dozens of arrests, searches, and crowd control operations, yet the courtroom now felt like a stage for something far more unpredictable, a small girl with a quiet voice. The judge, an imposing woman in her mid-50s, adjusted her glasses and peered down over the edge of the bench. Her gavel rested beside a thick stack of papers, and though she had presided over hundreds of cases, her eyes softened for the smallest witness in her courtroom. "Call the witness," she said, her voice cutting through the chatter. The bailiff stepped forward. "Lily Harper," he announced, and in that moment the room's energy shifted. Cameras swiveled, reporters straightened, and even the attorneys froze mid-movement. Lily's mother took a deep breath and lifted her daughter to stand on her own 2 feet. For a child her age, every step was hesitant, unsteady, and yet somehow there was determination in her movements. She approached the witness stand, her eyes wide and glossy as they scanned the sea of faces. The prosecutor, a man with a soft voice and careful demeanor, knelt beside her. "Hi, Lily," he said gently. "Do you know why you're here?" Lily shook her head. She didn't. She only knew that the dog was staring at her. Titan's eyes were unblinking, intelligent, observing. The K9 wasn't snarling, wasn't showing teeth, yet there was a silent intensity in his posture that made Lily pause. She took a small step back, clutching her bunny tighter. Across the room, the defense attorney muttered under his breath, "This is going to be interesting." The spectators leaned forward, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. Judges, attorneys, and reporters had all seen children in courtrooms before, but never one like Lily, so young, so small, yet holding the room's attention without a single word. The prosecutor's hand hovered in the air, unsure of how to proceed. "Lily," he said again softly, pointing gently toward Titan, "can you tell us what you saw that night?" The 3-year-old's head tilted slightly. Her brows furrowed as if she were processing the question. Her lips parted, then closed. She glanced at her mother, then at Titan, then back at the judge. The courtroom seemed to shrink around her. Even the fluorescent lights buzzed as if holding their breath. And then it happened. Lily raised her tiny hand. One finger extended, trembling, shaking slightly with the effort of pointing. Titan's ears twitched. Blake's grip on the leash tightened instinctively. The room fell silent, not the ordinary hush of a courtroom, but a heavy, expectant silence that pressed against everyone's chest. Even reporters lowered their cameras for a moment, captivated by the sheer audacity of a child confronting a full-grown police dog in a courtroom. "She's pointing," whispered one of the court reporters, eyes wide, "at Titan." The judge leaned forward, her gaze fixed on Lily, her gavel forgotten. "Proceed carefully," she murmured. The prosecutor knelt lower, trying not to loom over her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Lily, can you tell us what you're pointing at?" Lily's lips quivered. She shifted her gaze from Titan to the prosecutor and then back to the dog. She swallowed, her throat working audibly. A single bead of sweat formed at her temple, her chest rising and falling with nervous breaths. And then, with a clarity that belied her age, she spoke. The first word was soft, almost imperceptible. The second word came louder, sharper, resonating through the courtroom in a way that no adult could ignore. "Stop him." A ripple went through the room. Titan stiffened. Blake froze. The judge's hand hovered midair, gavel forgotten. Reporters gasped. Spectators whispered frantically. Even the defense attorney stepped back, adjusting his tie as if the words had physically struck him. No one had expected this. No one had anticipated a 3-year-old's voice carrying such weight, such authority, such clarity in a room dominated by adults. Questions swirled like smoke in the air. Did she know what she was saying? Was she repeating words she'd heard from someone else? Or had she witnessed something no one had considered? Blake's jaw tightened. He took a step closer to Titan, lowering his voice to a growl only the dog could hear. Titan's ears twitched again, alert, focused entirely on the tiny girl. Something about her words had changed the energy of the room. There was no aggression in Lily's tone, but the implication, the demand, was undeniable. Lily's mother put a hand on her daughter's back, squeezing gently. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. "You're doing fine." But no one in the courtroom felt okay. The tension was electric, almost unbearable. All eyes followed the small, trembling girl as she stood at the center of a moment that would soon become unforgettable. The judge cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the silence. "Ms. Harper," she said, "please remain where you are." But Lily didn't move. Her finger remained extended, trembling slightly, pointed directly at Titan. The K9's stance shifted subtly, his head tilting, ears flicking. Blake's grip on the leash tightened, a silent acknowledgement that this child had said something no one, including him, was prepared for. Whispers erupted in the courtroom. Spectators nudged one another, reporters jotted down notes frantically. Even the bailiff, standing rigidly near the bench, took a step back, uncertain how to react. In that moment, it was as if time had slowed. Every breath, every shuffle of a foot, every flick of an eye became magnified. The courtroom wasn't just a room full of people anymore. It was a stage, a crucible, and Lily Harper, at 3 years old, was the center of it all. And then, as if sensing the collective gaze upon her, Lily opened her mouth again, preparing to speak the words that would silence an entire room. The courtroom held its breath, waiting for the tiny voice to deliver a revelation that would change everything. The courtroom had gone utterly still, suspended in a rare, almost sacred silence. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly overhead, but nothing else moved. Not a pen scratching, not a foot tapping, not a single adult breath in the room seemed audible over the quiet determination of a 3-year-old girl standing at the witness stand. Lily Harper's small hand still pointed at Titan, the massive Belgian Malinois, and her eyes, wide, unwavering, and eerily steady, locked on the dog as if she could see something that no one else could. Her mother gripped the edge of the bench, knuckles white, whispering softly, "It's okay, baby, you're safe." Her voice trembled despite the gentle tone because she knew this wasn't just another court session. Something extraordinary was about to happen. Across the courtroom, attorneys froze mid-step. The prosecutor, who had faced hardened criminals and cold-blooded fraudsters, crouched near Lily, attempting to make eye contact. "Sweetheart," he whispered gently, "can you tell us what you're pointing at?" Lily blinked slowly. Her lips quivered as she processed the question. For a moment it seemed as though the courtroom itself had taken a collective breath. She was small, fragile, and yet somehow commanding. Her gaze returned to Titan, and the tension in the room became almost tangible. Then she spoke. "Stop him." The words were simple, 2 tiny words, but in the vast silence of the courtroom they echoed like a clap of thunder. Every head turned sharply toward Lily. Reporters' pens hovered over notepads midair. Cameras clicked, capturing the improbable moment. Titan's ears perked up, his entire body tensing instinctively. Blake Turner, his handler, froze as if those two words had struck him physically. His jaw tightened, and his knuckles whitened against the leash. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the judge, a veteran of hundreds of trials, leaned forward in her chair, eyebrows raised. "What did she just say?" she muttered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. Whispers erupted. "Did she just?" one reporter murmured. "She actually said it," another replied. Blake's eyes darted toward the defense attorney, then back to Lily. She can't mean," he started, but his voice faltered. He glanced at the prosecutor for backup, but there was none. The words had landed like a thunderclap. The prosecutor knelt closer, his voice soft and careful. "Lily, can you tell us why?" The little girl hesitated, her lips parting again. Titan, sensing something in her tone, shifted slightly, one paw lifting off the floor. His eyes stayed locked on her, unwavering. The atmosphere was charged, as though the two of them shared a secret that the courtroom was not privy to. I saw," she said, her voice rising just a whisper above the silence, "him hurting Daddy." The room froze. That tiny statement sliced through the courtroom, heavier than any legal argument or piece of evidence. Murmurs swelled to gasps. Lily's mother let out a shaky breath and covered her mouth. Journalists leaned forward, pens and cameras froze in mid-motion. Even the judge had to pause to collect herself, the words echoing in her mind. Blake's face went pale. His fingers clenched the leash until his knuckles were stark white. He knew what she had just said. That night, the night that had been documented as a straightforward arrest, a routine K-9 intervention, had never been so simple. There were details no one knew, pieces of the puzzle intentionally left out of reports. And now, the smallest witness in the room had just exposed something terrifyingly real. The prosecutor, swallowing hard, knelt even closer. "Sweetheart, what did you see exactly?" Lily shifted slightly on her feet, hugging her bunny closer to her chest. Her eyes, wide and glistening, darted from the dog to the officers in the room, as though trying to see if they were listening carefully. "Titan saved me," she said, her words fragile, almost fragile enough to be missed if one wasn't listening carefully. The courtroom reacted instantly. A collective intake of breath, a sudden shuffle of feet, murmurs of disbelief. Titan's handler, Blake, froze mid-step. He had trained this dog for years, seen countless arrests, countless bites, countless moments of tension, but he had never seen a child describe a night like this. He realized that Lily had witnessed the truth, something he had hoped would never resurface. Lily's mother's hands shook. Tears ran down her face as she realized the magnitude of her daughter's words. Her small, delicate child had just spoken more truth in 2 sentences than any of the adult testimonies had managed all week. The defense attorney, seizing the opportunity, rose dramatically. "Your Honor," he said, voice sharp, "let the record show that this child is pointing directly at the police K-9 involved in this arrest, claiming knowledge of the night's events. This is extraordinary testimony." Even the judge, though experienced and composed, leaned forward, eyes fixed on Lily. "I've seen many things in this courtroom," she admitted, her voice firm but cautious, "but never a child delivering testimony of this magnitude. Continue carefully." Blake's hand tightened on Titan's leash again. The dog, normally stoic and disciplined, twitched in response to the handler's tension. The officers in the room exchanged glances, uncertain whether they were witnessing innocence, memory, or something more remarkable. Lily's words began to ripple outward, touching everyone present in a way that was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just a child's observation. It was an accusation, a statement, a revelation. She was small, yes, but her words carried a weight far beyond her years. The prosecutor leaned in one more time. "Lily, did you see anything else?" Her lower lip trembled. She swallowed hard, her small chest rising and falling rapidly. He tried to take me," she whispered. The room went completely silent. Titan's ears flicked back and Blake froze, staring at the child. He knew exactly what she meant. That night the suspect had lunged in desperation, not at officers, not at property, but at Lily herself. The K-9 had intercepted him, the bite intended not as punishment but as protection. The journalist in the back scribbled frantically. 3-year-old girl just described the K-9's action as protection of her life, utterly unprompted. Cameras clicked repeatedly, capturing the impossible scene. Even the judge exhaled sharply, leaning on the bench. The courtroom had transformed in those minutes, from a place of formal procedure to a stage for something extraordinary. It wasn't just evidence anymore. It was narrative, emotion, truth, and innocence colliding in a way that no one had expected. Blake's face went pale. He stepped forward slightly, almost unconsciously, muttering under his breath. She knows," he said, more to himself than anyone else. Titan shifted, sensing the tension from his handler, yet responding only to Lily, who remained frozen, hands still pointed, eyes wide with unspoken knowledge. The prosecutor's voice, steady now but charged with disbelief, asked one last time, "Lily, are you sure?" She nodded solemnly, a tiny, serious motion that seemed impossible for a child of her age. Her words had already done what no report, no officer, and no lawyer could accomplish. She had changed the energy of the courtroom, put the K-9 under a new light, and revealed that the events of that night were more complicated and more human than anyone had dared to admit. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Reporters exchanged glances, murmuring into microphones. Spectators shifted uncomfortably in their seats, as though unsure if they were witnessing a courtroom or a miracle. Lily's mother placed her hand gently on her daughter's shoulder, squeezing in both pride and fear. And all the while, Titan sat alert but calm, his eyes never leaving Lily. Even the largest, most intimidating presence in the room seemed to understand that this child was the center of something far larger than herself. In that moment, every adult in the courtroom realized something. The smallest witness had just turned the entire case upside down. And no one knew what would happen next. The courtroom had transformed. What had started as a standard procedure, a case involving an arrest with a police K-9, had become something else entirely. Now all eyes were on Officer Blake Turner. The words of a 3-year-old girl, small, trembling, yet eerily precise, had pierced through the layers of bureaucracy, protocol, and carefully crafted reports. "Stop him. Titan saved me." Those two statements had shifted the entire energy in the room. Blake stood frozen, the leash taut in his hands. Titan's massive body moved subtly, sensing the tension radiating from his handler. The dog's ears flicked forward, head tilting slightly, eyes fixed on Lily as if asking silently, "What's next?" Blake had trained Titan to obey commands, to protect him, to act on instinct. But now, that same dog seemed to be waiting for guidance from a 3-year-old. The defense attorney rose, eyes narrowed and voice sharp, cutting through the silence. "Officer Turner," he said, packing slightly behind his table, "the witness has just claimed that your K-9 acted to protect her, yet your report states otherwise. How do you explain this discrepancy?" Blake's throat went dry. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He had rehearsed responses for every scenario imaginable, but this was unprecedented. A child's unfiltered account, innocent yet accurate, had illuminated what he had feared to admit in writing. He had omitted details from the report, not to deceive, at least not entirely, but to protect the department, to avoid scrutiny, to prevent a media frenzy. And now, Lily's words had pulled the truth into the open. The prosecutor, sensing the opening, leaned forward from his kneeling position. "Officer Turner," he said, keeping his tone steady, "can you tell the court exactly what happened the night Lily Harper's father was attacked? Please, recount the events without embellishment." Blake swallowed hard, gripping Titan's leash with shaking hands. The courtroom seemed to close in around him. Spectators leaned forward, reporters jotted furiously, and the judge's gaze pierced him like a laser. Even the bailiff, standing rigidly near the bench, shifted slightly, sensing the storm about to break. He took a deep breath. The suspect, Blake began slowly, his voice unsteady, lunged toward the child. He wasn't aiming at officers, he was aiming at the girl. His words hung in the air. The room collectively exhaled. The implication was clear. This was no routine arrest, no standard procedure. Titan had intervened. He had acted not on aggression, not on a command for force, but out of instinct, reacting to a threat that no one else had documented. The defense attorney's eyes widened. "And yet," he pressed, "your report states that the K-9 engaged the suspect directly and without provocation. Why would there be such a significant omission?" Blake looked down, jaw tight. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Titan, sensing the tension, nudged Blake's leg gently, his head tilted. It was as though the dog understood the full weight of the courtroom's gaze and was offering silent support. I didn't include everything in the report," Blake admitted finally, his voice low but firm. "I was trying to protect the department. There was a lot of chaos that night, smoke, shouting, panic. His voice cracked. He swallowed, fighting to maintain composure. "I didn't want people to question the judgment of the officers, the K-9 unit me. But now it's clear, Titan saved the girl." Murmurs swept the room. The prosecutor nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "And the suspect?" he asked quietly. "What happened to him?" Blake's fingers tightened around the leash again. He was restrained after the K-9 engaged. But that's not the part that matters. What matters is the child's safety. She could have been hurt. And Titan prevented that. The courtroom was silent again, but this time it was heavy with realization. Everyone present, the judge, the lawyers, the spectators, even the reporters, understood that the narrative they had been following for days was incomplete. The reports, the testimonies, the official story, none of it had captured the truth as vividly as Lily's 2 words had. The defense attorney, sensing the weight of the moment, pressed further. "Officer Turner, can you explain why such a critical detail, that the K-9 acted to protect the child, was not included in the report?" Blake exhaled slowly, his shoulders sagging under the invisible weight of responsibility and guilt. I was afraid that admitting the full story would raise questions about command, protocol, liability. I thought I was protecting the department. I thought I was protecting the integrity of the unit. But," his eyes flicked to Lily, standing small and resolute at the witness stand, "I wasn't protecting the truth." The judge leaned forward, her expression unreadable, lips pressed into a thin line. "Officer Turner," she said, her voice steady and commanding, "your report is now under scrutiny. The court must rely on the totality of the testimony, including that of the witness. Is there anything else you wish to disclose at this time?" Blake hesitated. Every instinct screamed to remain silent, to maintain the carefully constructed narrative he had spent years building. But he glanced down at Titan, who was focused entirely on Lily. The dog's presence seemed to lend him courage, or perhaps a reminder of the responsibility he had carried that night. Blake started, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to tell the truth about that night, about what really happened. And it starts with Titan protecting the child, just as she said." The courtroom held its breath. Even the judge, whose composure was legendary, leaned forward, as if sensing that the moment unfolding was more than testimony, it was revelation. Blake continued, recounting the chaos of that night, the flash of headlights, the screams, the sudden movement of a desperate suspect. He described how Titan had intercepted the man, how the dog's instincts had kicked in, how a carefully measured bite had prevented a potential tragedy. Every word was precise, measured, but laden with emotion, guilt, and relief. Lily's mother sobbed quietly, tears rolling down her cheeks, clutching her daughter. The spectators leaned forward, some covering their mouths in disbelief, some whispering frantically to one another. Reporters scribbled notes at a frantic pace, realizing that the story they had thought they understood had just been rewritten in real time by a child and a dog. And yet, despite the confession, the tension didn't dissipate. The judge cleared her throat, her eyes sweeping across the courtroom. "Officer Turner, you admit now that your report was incomplete and misleading." Blake nodded slowly, the leash heavy in his hands. "Yes, Your Honor. I see now that it was wrong to omit the full truth. Titan's actions, the child's safety, those should have been documented, every detail accurately." A murmur spread through the spectators. Titan, seemingly sensing the conclusion, lowered his head slightly, sitting obediently but alert. Blake exhaled, finally releasing a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, but the courtroom wasn't finished with him yet. The defense attorney's voice cut sharply across the silence. "And if the truth had been documented originally, how might the perception of your actions, and those of your unit, have been different?" Blake hesitated. He glanced at Lily, then down at Titan, then back at the attorneys. It would have shown that Titan wasn't aggressive without cause, that the K-9 unit acted correctly to protect a life, and that a child's words, even at 3 years old, can reveal the most important truth. The judge tapped her gavel lightly. "We will proceed carefully, but Officer Turner, be advised, your full disclosure is now part of the court record." Blake nodded. He felt the weight of the entire courtroom pressing down on him. The truth was out, but the consequences, personal, professional, emotional, were still looming. And all the while, Lily Harper remained at the center of the room, tiny but commanding, eyes locked on Titan, her finger still raised, pointing toward the massive dog who had saved her. The courtroom had been shaken by words no one expected, and no one knew what would happen next. The air in the Cedar Falls courtroom felt heavier now, almost suffocating. The words of a 3-year-old girl had done what no lawyer's argument, no piece of evidence, and no police report could. They had shifted the narrative entirely. The room had moved from structured decorum to a stage for revelation, and everyone, judge, jury, lawyers, officers, and spectators, could feel it. Outside, the courthouse steps were swarming with news crews. Cameras jostled for position, microphones hovered like impatient bees, and reporters whispered into earpieces, capturing every word that trickled out of the trial. Tweets and posts were already being drafted, streaming the unfolding drama in real time. 3-year-old witness shocks court. Police dog involved. Entire case under scrutiny. Every outlet sensed the story's viral potential, but inside the courtroom, there was no excitement, only a tense, almost painful anticipation. Inside, Lily Harper remained at the witness stand, clutching her worn bunny. She didn't understand social media, headlines, or public reaction. She only knew that people were staring at her, waiting for more, and that the dog she had come to trust, Titan, was watching her with unwavering focus. Officer Blake Turner stood beside Titan, the leash taut in his hands, the tension radiating from him like heat. His confession had opened a door, but it also revealed how fragile everything around him was. His K-9 report, once considered authoritative, was now under scrutiny. The prosecutor leaned forward, eyes sharp and calculating, replaying the night's chaotic events in his mind. "Officer Turner," he began carefully, "let us understand exactly what happened the night of the incident. Please recount it clearly for the court, step by step." Blake exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself. He began recounting the events that had been missing from his original report. It was late, around 11:30 p.m. There was a 911 call, a man threatening civilians. When we arrived, it was chaotic. People were screaming, cars honking. The suspect, his voice faltered for a moment. He lunged directly at the child. Gasps erupted in the courtroom again. Even hardened reporters took a step back. Spectators shifted in their seats, murmuring. The thought that a 3-year-old had been in immediate danger, combined with the revelation that the official narrative had omitted this critical detail, sent shockwaves through everyone present. Blake's voice steadied as he continued. Titan intercepted him immediately. He acted instinctively, not on command, not for aggression, but to protect the child. The suspect was restrained and Lily was safe. The prosecutor nodded slowly, processing the confession, but his mind was already turning toward implications. The defense attorney rose, voice sharp. So you admit that your official report was incomplete, that you omitted a critical detail of the K-9's actions. Blake swallowed hard. Yes, I didn't include it, he admitted, voice shaking. I was trying to protect the department, protect myself. I feared backlash if the full truth came out, but the truth, it matters more than appearances. The judge leaned forward, voice calm but forceful. Officer Turner, please understand. This court relies on truth above all else. Your admission is now on record. We will continue to examine the details, but the record will reflect the child's testimony as well as your acknowledgement of omission. Even Titan, sensing the shift in energy, sat alert but still, as if waiting for the next movement from either Blake or Lily. The K-9 was a silent participant in the unfolding drama, a living witness whose loyalty and training were now intertwined with a child's innocence and a handler's confession. The courtroom reporter in the back scribbled furiously. 3-year-old witness reveals K-9 acted to save her. Officer Turner admits report was incomplete. Entire case narrative now in question. Every sentence written captured a growing tension that wasn't just about legal procedure. It was about morality, accountability, and truth. Blake shifted uncomfortably, aware of the weight of his next words. He had kept silent for months, letting the official narrative control perception. But now, faced with a child whose innocence made her words undeniable, he could not hide any longer. There was chaos, he continued, voice low. Smoke, shouting, panic. I didn't want people to second-guess the actions of my unit or the K-9. But Lily, she was the center of that night. And Titan saved her. The courtroom absorbed his words like a wave hitting a cliff. There was an unspoken acknowledgement. The real story had been buried beneath reports, procedure, and fear. The tiniest witness, just 3 years old, had revealed the truth simply by pointing and speaking, cutting through the bureaucracy with clarity and innocence. The defense attorney's eyes narrowed, sensing the opportunity to challenge credibility while also recognizing the moral weight of the revelation. So, he said slowly, your report omitted a critical action that not only changed the outcome of the night, but also challenges the account of events that everyone has relied upon until now. Blake nodded, unable to deny it. Yes, it's true. The judge's gavel hovered over the bench but remained still. She leaned back slightly, observing the courtroom like a conductor before a symphony. We will continue, but understand that the court now relies heavily on the unfiltered testimony of the child witness as well as Officer Turner's admission. Every statement, every observation will be scrutinized in context. Lily Harper, still clutching her bunny, watched the grown-ups around her with an unknowing seriousness. She didn't understand reports, scrutiny, or legal strategy. She only knew that the dog beside her had saved her, and that telling the truth mattered. Outside the courtroom, the media were already buzzing with speculation. Tweets, headlines, and live updates cascaded across platforms. 3-year-old reveals truth of K-9 incident. Officer Turner admits report omitted critical detail. The story was going viral before the court had even adjourned for lunch. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters hopping for sound bites, capturing footage of Titan quietly sitting beside Blake, of Lily peeking out from behind her mother, and of the murmuring crowd of spectators still digesting what had just happened. Inside, the court continued. Blake's testimony, combined with Lily's statements, began to weave a new narrative that contradicted months of official documentation. Each word from Blake added weight to the idea that the night's events had been misrepresented, intentionally or not, in order to protect reputation and protocol. But now, the innocence of a 3-year-old had forced the truth into the light. Titan's massive frame remained alert, his eyes occasionally flicking toward Blake but always returning to Lily. The dog seemed to sense the moral gravity, the human fragility, and the child's role in revealing the truth. There was a strange, almost cinematic symmetry. The child, the dog, the handler, and the courtroom, each a character in a drama that had no script, only the unfolding reality. Blake continued, recounting minute details. The suspect's desperate movements, the child's father shielding her behind a car, the seconds that had seemed like eternity as Titan intervened. Every pause, every careful word added tension. The prosecutor, watching carefully, was forced to reconcile this account with the evidence on record: bodycam footage, written reports, witness statements. None of it fully captured the magnitude of what Lily had just revealed. And yet, despite the admission and testimony, the courtroom remained on edge. The unspoken truth was now partially exposed, but the implications stretched far beyond what anyone could anticipate. The child's words had pierced through protocol, procedure, and fear, leaving everyone, lawyers, officers, judge, and spectators, grappling with the moral weight of the moment. The judge finally spoke, her tone deliberate, calm, but carrying unmistakable gravity. This court recognizes that the testimony presented by the child witness and the confession of Officer Turner have fundamentally altered the understanding of events. We will proceed carefully, with all parties aware that the truth is emerging not from reports or procedure, but from the courage of the smallest witness in this case. Blake exhaled, feeling the first real weight lift from his shoulders, even as the tension remained. Titan nudged him gently, as if offering reassurance, and Lily, small and unwavering, remained at the center of the courtroom, her tiny hand still clutching her stuffed bunny, her eyes reflecting both innocence and an unshakable clarity. The courtroom had changed. The narrative had shifted, and everyone, reporters, lawyers, officers, and spectators, knew that the next revelation would dig even deeper into the night's events, uncovering truths that had been long buried and forcing confrontations no one was fully prepared for. Because Lily Harper, at just 3 years old, had already demonstrated that even the smallest voice could reveal the largest truths, the courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the prosecutor motioned for the playback of surveillance footage from the night of the incident. A hush fell over the room. Every eye, from the judge's keen gaze to the journalist's lenses, was fixed on the flickering screen. The video was grainy, the corners shadowed, but the chaos of that late-night scene was unmistakable. Cars honked frantically, the neon glow of streetlights bounced across wet asphalt, and the distant hum of an arriving police cruiser grew louder as the camera panned. Blake Turner shifted slightly, the leash taut in his hand. Titan, sensing the tension, rose from his obedient sitting position, ears twitching, eyes alert. The K9 had been the hero that night, but the footage could only hint at the truth. It captured motion, flashes of uniforms, and the silhouette of a suspect, but the most critical moments, the seconds when a child's life had been threatened, were obscured by a passing truck and a sudden flare of light. "Freeze it there," the defense attorney said abruptly, pointing at a frame showing a blur of movement near a car door. "Notice anything unusual?" The prosecutor squinted, leaning forward. That's the child's father," he muttered. The frame captured him crouched protectively behind the car, shielding someone small, Lily, from danger. His hand reached out, steady and urgent, as if he could somehow intercept the impending threat himself. Lily's mother gasped quietly, pressing a hand to her mouth. Her gaze never left the screen. Memories of that night, long buried in fear and shock, resurfaced in vivid flashes. The screams, the chaos, the helplessness, and the desperate hope that her daughter would be safe. The video resumed. Titan leapt into frame, muscles coiling with precision and speed that left viewers breathless. The dog intercepted the suspect's path with calculated force, jaws gripping lightly but firmly. The camera shook as the suspect fell back, struggling against the restraining officers. The visuals were quick, fragmented, but the implications were undeniable. A child had been in immediate danger, and a trained K9 had acted decisively to protect her. Blake swallowed hard. He could feel the courtroom's weight pressing down on him. Every adult, every official, every spectator, everyone who had trusted his initial report, was now seeing a truth he had tried to bury. He remembered the night vividly, The sounds of the altercation, the smell of smoke from a nearby dumpster, the flashing lights reflecting in Lily's wide eyes. Every second had felt stretched, almost eternal, as he made split-second decisions. Decisions that saved a life. The prosecutor paused the footage, pointing toward the small figure of Lily. "This child," he said, his voice measured but intense, "was placed directly in harm's way, and according to Officer Turner's admission, the K-9 acted to protect her. Would you agree, Officer Turner?" Blake nodded, his hands tightening around the leash. Yes, Titan acted to protect the child. That was his purpose in that moment. The defense attorney, sensing a pivotal moment, pressed forward. "And yet," he said, his tone sharp, "your report did not document the immediate threat to the child or Titan's protective actions. Why?" Blake's voice trembled. "Because I was afraid," he admitted. Afraid of scrutiny, of criticism, of the possibility that the K-9 unit could be blamed for using force, even when it prevented a tragedy. I didn't want to compromise anyone's career or my own, but in doing so, I failed to present the full truth. Whispers rippled through the spectators. Journalists scribbled furiously, capturing every word. Some murmured in disbelief. Others whispered to neighbors, trading glances that mixed shock and awe. The judge leaned back slightly, absorbing the confession, weighing the consequences while maintaining her composure. "Officer Turner," she said, her voice steady, "your acknowledgement of omission and the child's testimony are now part of the official record. We must continue carefully, as these details have fundamentally altered our understanding of the events that night." Blake exhaled, his shoulders sagging under the weight of the truth finally acknowledged. Titan nudged him gently, sensing relief but remaining alert. Every movement the dog made seemed to punctuate the gravity of the moment. Protection, loyalty, instinct. The prosecutor played the footage again, this time in slow motion. The subtle nuances became clearer. The suspect's desperate lunge toward Lily, her father's protective stance, and Titan's decisive interception. Every frame told a story that words alone could not capture. The room held its collective breath as the slow-motion replay highlighted the sheer timing and precision of the dog's action. Lily, still clutching her bunny, watched the screen with wide eyes. She didn't fully understand what she was seeing, but she recognized the urgency, the danger, and the heroism of Titan, the dog who had saved her life. Her small fingers gripped the stuffed toy tightly, and she whispered softly to herself, "Good boy, Titan." The judge, her voice calm but authoritative, addressed the courtroom. "We are witnessing not only the unfolding of factual events, but the intersection of courage, instinct, and truth. This footage, combined with testimony, creates a narrative that challenges previous assumptions and reports." Even the defense attorney, despite his tactical positioning, couldn't hide the astonishment on his face. "So the K-9 acted to protect the child, as testified by both the witness and the handler," he said slowly, emphasizing each word. "Yet the original report obscured this fact. Is that accurate?" Blake nodded solemnly. "Yes, it is accurate. Titan's actions were protective, and my report did not fully reflect that." The courtroom absorbed the weight of this truth. The unspoken reality of that night, the fear, the chaos, the heroism, was now laid bare for all to see. The small, 3-year-old witness had forced this revelation, and the impact of her words was seismic. Outside, reporters rushed to their cameras, capturing every reaction: Blake's visible tension, the judge's composed scrutiny, Titan's attentive posture, and the tiny girl who had spoken the truth. Social media updates exploded in real time. 3-year-old witness changes everything in police K-9 trial. Cedar Falls courtroom stunned by child's testimony and K-9 heroism. The story was spreading faster than anyone could type. Inside, the judge called for a brief recess. As spectators shifted in their seats, Lily's mother leaned close to her daughter. "You were so brave," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. So brave." Lily blinked slowly, her gaze still fixed on Titan, the dog who had saved her. She didn't understand fame or courage in the adult sense. She only knew that the dog was her friend, and that the world had just been reminded of something very important. Sometimes the smallest voices speak the largest truths. Blake exhaled, finally releasing some of the tension he had carried for months, but even as he stepped back, he knew the trial was far from over. The footage, the testimonies, and the moral weight of the truth had changed everything, but it also meant that further scrutiny, questions, and revelations were inevitable. And Lily, small yet unyielding, remained at the center of it all, a quiet force in a room overwhelmed with adults trying to reconcile reports, evidence, and the raw, undeniable truth of that chaotic night. Because sometimes, the night everything changes isn't defined by reports or procedure. It's defined by a single, decisive act of protection and the innocent words of a child who witnessed it. The courtroom understood one thing clearly. The events of that night were only just beginning to reveal their full story. The courtroom had reached a new level of intensity. Every person present, from attorneys to spectators, seemed to hold their breath collectively. The slow-motion footage of the chaotic night had already reshaped the narrative, and Blake Turner's confession about omissions in the K-9 report added an entirely new dimension. But now, the court needed more than emotion and eyewitness accounts. It needed accountability, documentation, and the unflinching confrontation of discrepancies that had been hidden for months. The judge's gavel tapped lightly on the bench, a call to order that was more symbolic than authoritative at this point. We will now examine the official K-9 report in comparison with eyewitness testimony and video evidence, she said, her tone firm. Officer Turner, please remain where you are. Blake's hand tightened around Titan's leash, the tension radiating from him almost palpable. Titan, sensing his handler's anxiety, sat alert, one paw tapping lightly on the polished wooden floor. The massive dog's gaze was locked on the child, unwavering, instinctively protective. The connection between the three of them, the child, the dog, and the handler, was undeniable, a silent bond forged in moments of life-threatening danger. The prosecutor leaned over the evidence table, carefully flipping through pages of Blake's original report. "Officer Turner," he began, voice calm but authoritative, "your original report omitted critical details regarding the child's presence and the suspect's threat. Can you explain why?" Blake swallowed hard, glancing at Lily briefly before returning his gaze to the floor. I was trying to protect the integrity of the K-9 unit and the department," he admitted, voice low but steady. "I didn't want anyone to question our actions or the protocol. I was afraid that full disclosure could jeopardize careers or worse, create public panic." The judge raised a hand slightly, signaling the need for clarity. "Officer Turner, the court understands fear, but your duty is to present the truth, regardless of consequence. Were there any specific moments that you now realize should have been included in the report?" Blake nodded slowly. "Yes, several. The suspect lunged at the child first, not at officers. Titan's intervention was direct and immediate. He protected her life. The father shielded her as best he could, but without Titan's response, she could have been seriously injured. The way I documented the event made it seem routine, but it was anything but." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The defense attorney, sensing the courtroom shifting beyond his control, adjusted his tie and stood, packing slowly. "So you admit, under oath," he said sharply, "that your report misrepresented the events of that night, that your omissions fundamentally altered the perception of the K-9's actions?" Blake's jaw tightened. "Yes. I misrepresented nothing intentionally to harm anyone, but I omitted crucial details. I see now that the omissions allowed the wrong narrative to persist, one that ignored the child's danger and Titan's heroism." The prosecutor motioned to a clerk, who brought forward another piece of evidence, the bodycam footage from the officers on the scene. The grainy, shaky video offered a new perspective, capturing the chaos from a ground-level view. Cars swerved, streetlights flickered, and the suspect's desperate movements were more apparent. But most importantly, it highlighted Lily, tiny, vulnerable, frozen in fear, just moments before Titan intervened. Lily's mother pressed her hand to her mouth. "Oh, baby," she whispered softly, eyes glistening. Her daughter didn't understand the full scope of what was happening, but she felt the tension, the gravity, the importance of the room around her. She squeezed her bunny tightly, instinctively aware that her words had already changed everything. The footage replayed, this time in slow motion. Titan sprang into action, intercepting the suspect with precision. The child's father moved instinctively to shield her, but his efforts alone would not have sufficed. Every movement was clear. Titan's timing, judgment, and protective instinct were impeccable. "Officer Turner," the prosecutor said quietly, pointing toward the screen, "does this match what you witnessed that night?" Blake nodded, his hand still trembling slightly around the leash. "Yes, that is exactly what happened. The threat was real. Titan responded as trained, but more importantly, instinctively to protect a life." The defense attorney rose again, voice sharp but tense. "And yet," he said, pointing to the report, "this critical element is missing. How can the court be expected to trust any documentation if the facts can be omitted so easily?" Blake met the attorney's gaze. "The documentation was incomplete. I am taking full responsibility for that. The omission does not diminish Titan's actions, nor does it change the truth of what occurred. But it does mean the report cannot be relied upon without the context now provided." The courtroom was silent, heavy with the implications. Titan, sitting patiently, exuded calm authority. He was more than a dog. He was a symbol of instinct, loyalty, and courage, juxtaposed against human error and hesitation. The child, Lily, looked at him, as if acknowledging the unspoken truth they shared. The judge leaned forward. "We will now allow questioning regarding the inconsistencies in the report. Officer Turner, understand that this is not to discredit you personally, but to reconcile the record with the facts." Blake nodded, swallowing hard. He knew the next minutes would be scrutinized, dissected, and analyzed by every observer in the room. But he also knew that the truth had to be told. The prosecutor directed attention to a series of timestamps in the report that contradicted the bodycam footage. "Here," he said, "your report states that the K-9 engaged the suspect at 11:45 p.m., but the footage clearly shows Titan intervening at 11:32 p.m. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Blake's shoulders slumped slightly. "The timestamps were recorded incorrectly. In the chaos, I relied on approximations, but the critical moments, Titan's intervention to protect the child, occurred exactly as shown on video." The judge's gaze swept across the courtroom. "This discrepancy, along with your admission of omission, demonstrates why first-hand testimony, even from a child, can be critical. Officer Turner, you now acknowledge that the initial report failed to represent the severity and sequence of events accurately." "Yes, Your Honor," Blake replied, voice steady despite the tension. "It failed to capture the urgency, the threat, and the protective actions of Titan and others present." Lily's mother exhaled, a small, almost imperceptible sound, relief mixed with lingering anxiety. Her daughter, though unaware of the full implications, had already become a central figure in a story of bravery, truth, and accountability. The courtroom had shifted from procedural scrutiny to moral reckoning. The defense attorney, realizing the tide had turned, sat down, muttering under his breath. Even he recognized that the narrative had been fundamentally altered. The child's testimony, combined with Blake's confession and the bodycam footage, left little room for doubt. The events of that night were more complex and more heroic than anyone had documented. The prosecutor turned toward the jury, voice firm but calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have seen the footage. You have heard the testimony, and you have heard the acknowledgement of omissions in official reports. The truth is now clear. A child's life was in immediate danger, and a K-9 unit acted decisively to protect her. The smallest witness has revealed the largest truth. The judge adjusted her glasses, leaning back in her chair. We will take a brief recess. When we return, we will examine additional witness statements and the implications for the ongoing case. But know this, the events you have witnessed so far have changed the course of this trial irrevocably. Outside the courtroom, the media buzzed with excitement and urgency. Tweets flew, live streams captured reactions, and the story spread like wildfire. Headlines were already forming. 3-year-old's words expose critical omission in police K-9 report. Cedar Falls trial shaken by child witness and K-9 hero. Social media users debated, shared, and speculated, captivated by the image of a tiny girl whose innocence had forced the truth into the open. Inside, Blake exhaled, finally letting some of the tension drain. Titan nudged him gently, a reminder of their shared responsibility and the bond forged under extreme pressure. And Lily, small but resolute, remained at the center of it all, a quiet force in a room overwhelmed by scrutiny, emotion, and the growing realization that sometimes the truth is revealed in the simplest, most innocent words. The courtroom understood one thing clearly. The night's events had been misrepresented for months, and now the full scope of the story, heroism, danger, and moral courage, was being revealed piece by piece. And everyone present knew that the revelations were far from over. The courtroom was electric, every seat filled, every eye locked on the unfolding drama. What had begun as a routine K-9 trial had transformed into something far greater, a moral reckoning, a test of courage, and a confrontation with the raw, unfiltered truth. The events of that night were no longer abstract. They were vivid, immediate, and undeniable. Blake Turner shifted slightly, Titan at his side, alert and ready. The dog seemed to sense the escalation in the room. There was a tension that went beyond protocol. It was instinct, intuition, and human emotion converging. Blake had confessed omissions. Footage had revealed the true sequence of events. And Lily Harper, small and resolute, had spoken 2 words that shattered the official narrative. Now, the time had come for the suspect to face the courtroom in full awareness of the truths being revealed. The prosecutor's gaze sharpened. "We will now hear testimony from additional witnesses present that night," he said. "Each will corroborate or clarify details, further illuminating the actions of the K-9 unit and the threat posed to the child." First up was Officer Jenna Morales, a patrol officer who had been positioned across the street during the arrest. She stepped forward, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I saw the suspect move toward the child's location. He was aggressive, unpredictable. The father tried to shield her, but she was exposed. The K-9 Titan intercepted with precision, biting to restrain, not to harm." The defense attorney raised his eyebrows, clearly unsettled. "Officer Morales, are you saying that the child was in immediate danger and that the K-9's response was appropriate?" "Yes," Morales replied firmly. "Titan acted according to training, and his actions saved a life." The courtroom reacted audibly this time. Gasps, murmurs, a shift in energy as the witnesses' accounts converged. Even hardened reporters glanced at each other, sensing the story unfolding was far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Next, the child's father was called to the stand. He stepped up cautiously, a man still bearing the emotional scars of that night. "I did everything I could to protect her," he said quietly. "But I was too slow. The suspect moved faster than I expected. Titan saved her. I've watched the footage 100 times. Without the dog, I don't even want to think what could have happened." Blake swallowed hard. Every word reinforced the gravity of the omissions in his original report. He glanced at Lily, who looked up at him, her small fingers gripping her stuffed bunny, eyes wide with quiet understanding. Even at 3, she sensed the significance of what was happening. She had spoken the truth, and now everyone else had to reconcile with it. The defense attorney, realizing the momentum had shifted, tried a final attempt. "Officer Turner, are you suggesting that the actions of the K-9, which were omitted from your report, justify all the conclusions drawn from the official narrative, that the department should be absolved of scrutiny. Blake's jaw tightened. No, I'm saying the truth must be acknowledged. Titan acted to protect a life. My omissions, while intended to protect protocol, misrepresented the severity of the threat. The department's actions must be evaluated in the context of the full truth. The judge nodded. We will now allow the suspect to testify. The man, arrested and restrained, walked to the stand with heavy steps. His face was pale and a subtle tremor ran through his hands. The courtroom leaned in collectively. For months, his actions had been documented as a routine arrest, but now the narrative had been stripped bare. The threat he posed, the child's vulnerability, and the K-9's intervention were all laid bare. Do you understand why you are here? The judge asked, her voice firm. The suspect nodded, eyes darting toward Lily, who remained calm, a quiet observer of the chaos she had helped illuminate. Yes, he whispered, voice barely audible. Can you describe your actions that night? The prosecutor asked, voice steady. The man hesitated, swallowing hard. I was desperate. I didn't mean to. I didn't want anyone hurt. I just... His words faltered as the memory of Titan's interception, the dog's precise, protective action, flashed in his mind. The courtroom was still, as if holding its breath along with him. You lunged at the child, the prosecutor said firmly, not accusatorily but stating fact. Why? The suspect's voice cracked. I wasn't thinking. I panicked. I thought I could get away. I didn't mean to. His gaze dropped to the floor. He was small, diminished, and yet the gravity of his actions was undeniable. Blake felt a chill. Even after months of trying to reconcile the reports with his conscience, hearing the suspect admit, however haltingly, that the child had been directly endangered struck him with renewed intensity. Titan shifted slightly, placing a paw gently on Blake's foot, a silent reminder of loyalty, precision, and protection. The judge's eyes swept the courtroom, lingering on the child briefly. Lily Harper, she said softly, you spoke the truth when no one else could. Your words brought clarity to a complex event. Do you understand that? Lily nodded slowly, her small head bobbing. She didn't understand the full legal implications, but she understood that the grown-ups were paying attention to her, that the dog who had saved her was still there, and that truth mattered. The prosecutor turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, the facts are now clear. The child's life was endangered, the suspect acted recklessly, and the K-9 unit intervened precisely as trained. Yet, initial reports failed to capture this reality. Accountability requires acknowledgement, courage, and recognition of the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. The defense attorney, sensing the trial's trajectory slipping, tried a final intervention. Your Honor, with all due respect, a 3-year-old witness, while compelling, may not fully comprehend events. How can her statements carry such weight? The judge's gaze was unyielding. Age does not negate accuracy. Her testimony has been corroborated by multiple eyewitnesses and footage. The weight of her words is undeniable. Lily's mother exhaled, relief mingling with fear. She had feared this day, feared the public attention, and feared the courtroom scrutiny. Yet her daughter's courage had forced the truth into the open, reshaping everyone's understanding of that night. The courtroom seemed to pulse with a mix of awe and tension. Every adult present had been forced to confront a reality they hadn't fully anticipated. The heroism of a dog, the vulnerability of a child, and the moral responsibility of those who had tried to control the narrative. Blake, standing tall despite the scrutiny, felt a mix of relief and apprehension. He had admitted his omissions, defended the truth of Titan's actions, and acknowledged the stakes of the night. Yet the trial was far from over. Questions would remain, reputations would be examined, and the implications of the child's testimony would ripple far beyond the courtroom walls. Titan shifted slightly, nose twitching, aware that the danger had passed but that vigilance remained. The dog had acted instinctively to protect life, And now, in the quiet aftermath of confrontation, he was a symbol of loyalty, precision, and courage. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked at everyone in the courtroom. This trial has revealed more than facts. It has revealed courage, honesty, and the importance of listening to voices that may seem small but carry enormous truth. We will recess briefly and then continue with closing testimonies. But understand this: the events of that night and the revelations in this courtroom will have consequences far beyond these walls. Lily clutched her bunny, looking up at Titan, then at her mother, her wide eyes reflecting innocence, clarity, and quiet strength. She had spoken, she had revealed the truth, and she had changed the course of the trial in ways no adult alone could have achieved. The courtroom had faced the confrontation, the omissions had been acknowledged, and the night's events had been laid bare. But the climax, the final reckoning, was yet to come. And everyone present knew that the next moments would determine justice, accountability, and the enduring legacy of courage in the face of danger. The courtroom was still, heavy with anticipation. After days of testimony, confessions, and revelations, the moment of reckoning had arrived. Every person present, the judge, the attorneys, the officers, reporters, and spectators, could feel it. The tension was almost tangible, like a storm about to break, and at the center of it all stood Lily Harper, clutching her bunny, her small frame brimming with quiet courage. Blake Turner shifted slightly, Titan at his side, sensing the weight of the moment. The K-9 had acted instinctively, decisively, and heroically, and now the world was watching how that heroism, combined with the bravery of a 3-year-old, would reshape justice. Blake exhaled slowly. Months of uncertainty, fear, and guilt had led to this point. The truth, finally laid bare, would now have consequences. The judge's gavel tapped once, twice, calling the courtroom to attention. Ladies and gentlemen, the trial has presented testimony, evidence, and confessions that have fundamentally altered the understanding of the events of that night, she began. Her voice, steady and authoritative, carried across the room. We have witnessed the courage of a child witness, the instinctive heroism of a police K-9, and the acknowledgement of omissions in official reports. It is now the court's duty to consider these facts in rendering judgment. A hush fell over the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicked, and the jury leaned forward in unison. The gravity of the moment was not lost on anyone present. Justice, it seemed, was no longer about procedure alone. It was about truth, courage, and accountability. The prosecutor rose, voice steady, commanding the room. Your Honor, the evidence is clear. The suspect endangered a child, and without the intervention of Titan, that child could have been seriously harmed. The K-9 unit acted appropriately, heroically, and in accordance with training. Officer Turner has admitted to omissions in his report, but those omissions do not diminish the undeniable truth of Titan's actions or the danger posed by the suspect. Justice, in this case, demands acknowledgement of the heroism that protected an innocent life. The defense attorney, seated with a furrowed brow, rose reluctantly. Your Honor, he began, voice measured but strained. While we acknowledge the bravery of the K-9 unit and the child's testimony, it remains true that the original report failed to reflect these facts. There is accountability required for these omissions. We do not dispute the events themselves, but the procedural errors must be recognized. The judge nodded slightly. Understood. Both bravery and accountability will be considered. However, the moral weight of this trial rests on one fact above all else. A child's life was endangered, and a K-9 unit responded with precision and courage. The court then allowed the father of Lily Harper to speak. Rising slowly, his voice shaking, he addressed the room. I was helpless that night, he admitted, eyes on the floor for a moment before lifting to meet the jury. I couldn't protect my daughter fast enough, but Titan saved her. And my little girl, Lily, she told the truth when no one else could. That courage, her courage, changed everything. I stand here not only as a witness, but as a father who owes his daughter's life to instinct, loyalty, and truth. Lily's mother hugged her daughter tightly, tears running freely down her cheeks. Lily, small and composed, hugged her bunny, glancing at Titan, who had been her protector, silent yet commanding. The dog's presence seemed monumental in that moment, the embodiment of courage, fidelity, and instinctive morality. The judge's eyes swept the room, lingering briefly on the child. "Lily Harper," she said softly, "your words have revealed truths that no report, no procedure, and no adult testimony could fully capture. You have changed the course of this trial simply by speaking the truth. The court recognizes your role in this process." Lily nodded shyly, clutching her bunny. Her innocence had been her power, her clarity cutting through the layers of bureaucracy and human error. The room remained still, awed by the presence and impact of a child whose simple statements had reshaped the entire narrative. The judge then turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have seen the threat posed to the child, the heroic intervention by the K-9, and the acknowledgement of omissions in official documentation. Your responsibility is to weigh the actions of all parties against the facts presented and render a verdict that reflects truth, justice, and accountability." The jury filed out to deliberate, the tension in the room unrelenting. Reporters whispered, spectators exchanged glances, and Blake shifted uneasily, fingers tightening around Titan's leash. Outside the courtroom, the media buzzed with anticipation, updates streaming live to social media. Headlines were already forming. 3-year-old's testimony forces justice in K-9 trial. Cedar Falls courtroom shaken by child and heroic dog. Minutes stretched into an hour. Inside the courtroom, every person present seemed to feel the weight of the impending decision. The 3-year-old girl, small yet resilient, sat quietly beside her mother, clutching her bunny. Titan remained alert, ears flicking to sounds and movements around him, a sentinel even in moments of stillness. Finally, the jury returned. The foreperson stood, voice steady, eyes meeting the judge's. "Your Honor, we have reached a verdict," he said. The courtroom held its collective breath. The judge leaned forward. "Please deliver the verdict." The foreperson cleared his throat. "We find the suspect guilty on charges of endangering a child and resisting arrest," he stated clearly. "The actions of the K-9 unit were necessary, precise, and heroic. Officer Turner's omissions, while serious, do not diminish the outcome nor the undeniable truth of the events. We recognize the bravery of the child witness, Lily Harper, whose testimony was critical to understanding the facts." A wave of relief swept the courtroom. Lily's mother hugged her daughter tightly, whispering words of pride. Blake exhaled deeply, his shoulders relaxing as Titan nudged him gently, a silent affirmation of duty and success. The courtroom had witnessed the triumph of truth, courage, and accountability. The judge's gavel struck firmly, finalizing the decision. This court recognizes the bravery of all involved, the child, the K-9 unit, and the officers who acted to protect life. Justice has been served, and the record now reflects the full truth of that night. Outside the courthouse, news helicopters hovered, capturing the release of statements and reactions. Social media lit up with images of Lily, Titan, and Blake Turner. Headlines celebrated the smallest voice forcing the largest truth into daylight. The story would ripple far beyond Cedar Falls, a testament to courage, heroism, and the moral clarity of a child's unfiltered words. Back inside, Lily Harper hugged Titan gently. "Good boy," she whispered, the dog nudging her hand in response. Blake looked on, pride and relief etched across his face. The courtroom had been transformed by truth, but the bond between the child and the K-9, the tiny witness and the dog who saved her, remained the heart of the story. Blake finally knelt beside Titan, running a hand along the dog's neck. "You did it, buddy," he said softly. "You saved her, and now the world knows the truth." The judge, rising from her bench, addressed the courtroom one final time. "Let this case serve as a reminder that truth can come from anywhere, even the smallest voice. Courage and honesty, no matter the source, demand recognition. Today, justice has been served not only through procedure but through the bravery of those who acted to protect life. As the courtroom emptied, the significance of the day lingered. A 3-year-old child had altered the course of justice. A dog had acted with instinctive heroism. An officer had confronted his own omissions and embraced the truth. The trial had been more than a legal proceeding. It had been a testament to courage, morality, and the profound impact of honesty. Lily Harper, small yet monumental in her influence, walked hand in hand with her mother, Titan trotting loyally by Blake's side. Cameras followed, flashes lighting the path, social media ablaze with admiration and awe. The trio moved slowly, a living symbol of courage, instinct, and truth realized. And in that moment, everyone understood. Sometimes the smallest voices speak the loudest truths, and sometimes the quietest heroes, whether child or dog, can change the world. The courtroom would remember the day Lily Harper spoke, Titan acted, and justice was served, not as it was written, but as it had truly happened.